Amanda ela é diretora do Impacto Project, que é uma iniciativa que já reuniu mais de 2.000 atores globalmente em diversas demografias e geografias para pensar consensos de quando a gente fala e mede impacto. Ela vai falar isso muito melhor do que eu agora. Então, obrigada novamente.
Thank you again, everyone, for being here. I'm so excited to be talking with you and hearing about all the conversation you've had throughout the day. I've been listening in carefully. And I just wanted to share a little bit about why I am in Sao Paulo. And also why I'm here to share a little bit more on the Impact Management Project, because I can't be everywhere. Our team can't. This consensus that's been built is everyone's work. It's not just one team. And your team in Brazil, the teams of Vox, of ICE, of many others in the Brazilian ecosystem have contributed so deeply to the consensus that I'm about to talk about. And it's really incredible to me to be in a setting where everyone is talking about impact using a shared understanding, and that Vox Capital is operationalizing it across their portfolio. So for me, this is a really incredible opportunity and a tribute to all the hard work that's gone into it. Can I still get a thumbs up, a middle thumbs or thumbs? Okay, great. So as Jessica has described already, the Impact Management Project has brought together thousands of practitioners. You'll see some logos you recognize here, and you may see some new ones who are actually institutional investors, perhaps, that we wouldn't consider to be impact investors. You will see nonprofits and foundations. You will see advisory companies and evaluators, all represented and around the same table. Because at the end of the day, we also saw the need for a shift in conversation, which was talked about in the last presentation as well. The need for a movement forward that was only going to be reached if we could all agree on something. In finance, money wouldn't flow if we didn't agree that it was valuable and that we have expectations about return and risk we were willing to take with our money. And so for impact, the same kind of shared understanding is needed so we can set expectations with each other and know how well we're doing. So that's why it's been critical to this work and the work of all of ours that we talk across silos and stop using just the lingo and the narrative that we know, but try to ground it in something that everyone can understand. And that was a real core objective of the project. The challenge we were seeing and still see was actually, again, mentioned in the last presentation, that difference between evaluation and planning, right? What is the difference between goals and performance? In finance, you wouldn't look at a financial statement and know whether it was good or bad if you didn't have any goals set around it, whether explicit or implicit. A lot of the impact conversation has focused, the impact measurement conversation has focused where that red box is. Impact measurement is happening at the enterprise level, and it's measuring what has happened. That, however, does an injustice to what we're really trying to understand. We want to understand at the end of the day what the people and the planet are experiencing. We want organizations to have that data so that they can analyze it and do more good and less bad. And then we also want investors to access that data so that they can construct portfolios that reflect more positive impact and less negative impact. So across that top row, what we're talking about is having a better understanding of performance. But what we often forget in the measurement debates is that impact measurement is only useful for how much we can reach that impact, right? How we can make better decisions. We have to set expectations or goals. We as people have expectations about impact when we buy a product or a service from a company. Enterprises have expectations or goals about what they want their customers, their employees, or the environment to experience. And investors allocate capital to achieve goals that they have set to their co-investors or asset owners. And I think where we're getting to increasingly is this exciting, magical moment where we're starting to measure only what matters to understand whether we're on track or not, and what's happening so that we can do better. And it means that we had to step a little bit away from the measurement debate. It is necessary, but it's insufficient, because if we are measuring 1,000 things and not one of those things are actually useful for making better decisions, then it doesn't matter that we've measured at all. And this is very obvious to everyone in the room. It also reflects, I think, what has been discussed today. But I think this was the challenge that we all have been and are observing. And 3 years ago, when the Impact Management Project started, we're trying to address through a collaborative consensus building process. I hope the translators don't hate me for speaking too fast. You can also go like this if you think I am, but I hope that it's all coming across okay. So the Impact Management Project came to consensus around very basic questions at first. What is impact? What does it mean for an individual experiencing that impact? And we did focus groups around the world. We did it with people who were buying government services or receiving government services, who were buying products. We also did this with businesses to say, what do you think people experience with your product? And also investors. And Vox Capital did a really great consultation of the Brazilian market that you can find on the website if you're interested to bring in that perspective. And what was agreed is that impact is not just one number. I think the word complex in Portuguese maybe was used earlier. I don't know if it's complex, but it's multidimensional. That's how we started thinking about it. It is very hard to understand impact without looking at 5 dimensions that have been agreed through the project. Everything we do has outcomes on people and the planet. So what is impact? It's a change that would likely not happen anyway. And to understand the nuance of that, we need to be much more critical with ourselves and our friends and our peers about the questions we're asking and the information we're giving. If I hear, 1 million lives touched, again, I'll be very sad, right? What does that tell us? What did touching mean? Who were those lives? What are we trying to understand about what has actually happened through a business model or in a portfolio? And these 5 dimensions are very simple at the core. It should be things that are not surprising at all, because first of all, you've created this. And second of all, it's just what sits behind our intuition. We want to know what's happening, positive or negative, who's experiencing it. Did they need that outcome? Is it happening at scale, in a deep way, or for the long term? Would it have happened anyway? And what's the risk that it all goes terribly wrong? I can just say it one more time, but I'm going to do it in a different way for the translators, just so it becomes clear how inseparable these really are when we talk about impact. So when we think about impact, the Sustainable Development Goals are coming up very often in the global narrative. What are they telling us? They are telling us what important positive outcomes the world needs. That said, every business has to monitor positive and negative outcomes. Impact is not always positive. And I think that's something very cool that's come out of this work, is the ability to be open and talk about potential negative outcomes and what we're doing to mitigate them. But if we're talking about any of the Sustainable Development Goals, we don't want to know what SDG only. We want to know who is experiencing that SDG, Did they need access to quality education or health? Were they severely underserved? And are we talking about change that is at scale? A deep driver of the change, so maybe for less people, but a deep driver, or change that is lasting for a long time. And usually these three dimensions are inseparable in our conversations. And it's an opportunity now to reflect on that and challenge each other to talk about impact in a way that doesn't lose some of the nuance that makes it valuable, that makes it comparable, and that makes it useful for decision making within business and within portfolios. The theory of change was talked about a lot, so I'm glad I put this slide in today. This classic theory of change is not incongruous, but it's a certain approach, the theory of change, that's very linear, right? We know what we're putting in. We do some stuff with what we put in. We get something out of it, and then we see outcomes that we may describe in more or less detail. But it's often focused on one stakeholder, maybe just the customer, not including the environment and employees, perhaps. It may lose some of the context of impact that we want to know at the far right-hand side, which is where I think we might struggle at times. It gets us to understanding an outcome, but without the context of who, how much, what the market's doing anyway, and the risk that it goes wrong, that theory of change ends in just that, an outcome that cannot be compared or contrasted with anything else that's happening in the business and anything that's happening outside of it. And so I think the theory of change has been an incredibly useful tool, and one that we can continue to ask critical questions about when we really use, I think, the consensus that we've all reached to ask tougher questions about, are we getting the full picture of impact at the end of that theory of change exercise? So I hope what you've just gathered from those first few slides is not me teaching anything, because I think you've taught the world, really, like we're all doing this in our own way, but rather it's about the questions we can ask each other and within our organizations that give us a full picture of impact, positive and negative, and what we can do to improve it. And it also gives us a way to communicate up to investors or down to entrepreneurs in a way that's meaningful for both. Also, businesses to customers, to employees, in a way that's meaningful to those people as well. The reason I'm just bringing this back up is because I think investors often ask maybe for a lot of metrics, or funders as well, without context on why they're being asked. And what this helps us do is ground why we're asking those questions and what change we think it will make in the way the business or the portfolio is running. So more than anything, I hope you all see the Impact Management Project, and all of this is a public good. So all of this is available online for free, including resources, templates, training materials, because this was created by and for everyone. There's nothing here that means you have to change what you currently use. It provides a lens to think about what you're doing now and think about whether it's really capturing everything that you want to know about impact and the goals that you want to communicate to funders, to investors, and then down to your portfolio as well. And on the website, you'll see some of these decision questions really come to life, a way to just ground in exactly those questions, which turn into a good checklist, basically. A checklist to look at what you have and think about whether it's capturing the full picture. I took this out of Vox Capital's new report that I know the team has worked very hard on, because what it does is bring to life what I've just described, and provide what are the goals, the impact goals that Vox Capital has across their portfolio, including what I think is really special about this, how they are finding that information. What kind of evidence do they look for and what do they need? And if there's one thing, and I will come back to it at the end as well, that we desperately need more of, it is transparency and openness and a willingness to say, this is what we want to know, and this is how we think we know we're on track. And sharing learnings and data where we can has already proven over the past few years to change the conversation significantly away from high level, what we think we're achieving, aren't we great, didn't we touch so many lives, to we know we want to change health outcomes in this community, and we are struggling to know whether it's a deep driver of this change or whether we're really able to do this in the way we want at scale, for example. So these conversations are happening more and more, especially between maybe what would have been perceived as competitors, but we're not competing on impact, right? In a lot of ways, if we all do more good and less bad, the world's a better place, and all of what we're trying to do is bettered as well. So this is a step in a promising direction where transparency is rewarded and actually moves the whole field forward as we go. And I would be remiss to not flag the importance of intention in all of this. I mean, I am sure all of you are in this room because you believe that it is possible for business and investment to do good in the world. But there's a lot of shades of pink here on this slide, or gray, where a lot of the financial markets still may or do cause harm. So may cause harm and don't know, or do cause harm and don't care. Once we ask the question of what negative impacts might we be having on our customers, on our employees, on the environment, we move into the world that this room is in, which is, are we doing enough to avoid harm to all of our stakeholders? And in the impact investing world, this isn't the narrative that's very common. We jump all the way to what good are we doing? But through the project, I think it's important to flag that no one believes that if you do a little bit of good and a lot of bad, that you are, that's okay, right? We want to make sure that we are acting to avoid harm, and from there, trying to do more good for all of our stakeholders, benefiting them, whether it's for financial performance reasons, whether it's because you believe that business can have a positive impact on the world. So first, we're acting to avoid harm. Then we're thinking, how do we generally benefit all our stakeholders? And then we move to, what is a specific important outcome that I want to see happen? And how am I going to gather the evidence I need to know whether that is happening? And that's the contribute to solutions. So I wanted to share this with you all because a lot of times the 5 dimensions of impact are useful in terms of asking questions, but the level of detail that people want and need is to feel confident that what is happening in our companies and in our portfolios is broadly where we don't have perfect data. Do we feel confident that we are acting to avoid harm, going a bit further and benefiting stakeholders, and then or going a bit further and contributing to solutions? And I want to challenge everyone in this room to ask and make sure that all of this is happening, because in the impact world, we tend to not talk about the negative stuff often and jump right to what solutions we're contributing to. So there's an opportunity to bring in both and show how the impact investing ecosystem in Brazil, for example, is really making sure that all stakeholders are taken care of, and maybe some are being focused for solutions and contribution by the organizations in this room. I finally just want to flag another important part of the consensus. We've been talking about what enterprises and companies' impacts are on people and planet. At the end of the day, they're at the front line and they're delivering products, services that affect people on the planet. So what is an investor's role? We're in a room where Vox Capital is describing its impact. What they have to understand is the impact of the enterprises in their portfolio, which takes a lot of time and energy, and then think about what's their contribution to the impact of those companies. This is a very simple concept, but I think about 3-4 years ago, we were seeing a lot of investors, including ones that I've worked in and with, claim impact as their own, rather than say, we actually have a portfolio that has impacts, and here is what we're doing to contribute to that portfolio. So Vox Capital, again, has taken a huge step forward in transparency, and we have over 400 funds around the world currently doing exactly what Vox Capital has done here, which is saying across the top, the ABC I just talked about, act to avoid harm, benefit stakeholders, contribute to solutions. What do we expect to happen in our portfolio? And what data are we looking for? And then what are we doing to contribute as investors? And here we see that Vox Capital is in many ways signaling that impact matters to companies, saying that this is important and they want to see measurable impact. They're engaging actively during investment and making sure that they're providing expertise, resources that will support and contribute to an organization's impact. And they're growing newer undersupplied capital markets where they are perhaps taking on a disproportionate risk, volatility, illiquidity. They're going places that some capital is not willing to go. Some investors are not willing to go for the sake of seeing impact happen there. But they are not doing this at the expense of financial returns, which I think was another linear challenge we've had over the past few years, which is if you have more impact, then you lose money. And I think we, through the IMP, have seen that that is just, we have evidence now that that is not true, because we are seeing funds map to this matrix in the contribute to solutions column, and where Vox Capital is, everywhere above that on this matrix is not accepting lower financial returns. They are looking to achieve competitive financial returns, but still contribute and focus on the impact of their portfolio. And we're seeing more and more investors do this. For those who are interested in this and the world of capital that's out there, please go to the website. There's something called the Impact Classes section of the website where you can see where funds are mapping transparently. So we can, again, achieve this greater awareness and visibility about what is actually out there in the market. So I'm going to close just by sharing with a very noisy slide what is happening now. For those of you who know the Impact Management Project, you know that the first year was about building consensus and seeing if we could agree on anything at all. The second year was saying, does this work? Is it practical? What are the training materials and resources that we need to do this well? And we've just entered a period of recognizing that the world has enough acronyms. IMP never meant to add one to the mix, and I'm sorry for that. But what we also recognize is those acronyms exist for a reason. There are a lot of existing standard setters and infrastructure platforms out there that are already moving us forward, but they are very disconnected at times. And so some of you might know, what's a good example? The Global Reporting Initiative and SASB are two corporate disclosure platforms that are used globally. We also have the GIN and their IRIS catalog. All of these are disclosures that we might want to use for our businesses or our investments to know what do I need, what do I care about in terms of water in this industry? Like, what metrics do I need? So they've all come together through this structured network to say, we recognize it's complicated, we're not making it easier. And together, we have a shared vision, which is on the right-hand side, that all enterprises and investors have processes to measure positive and negative impacts that matter most to people on the planet, disclose that data in a comparable way wherever possible, compare those impacts to know what could be better, and ultimately improve performance over time. This is a vision that's far beyond measurement. To the beginning of this chat, it's about, first of all, a better world, but also ability to do more good and less bad with the resources that we have, and in a way that we can all understand. So I won't go into too much detail unless there's questions on everyone's role in this structured network, but I want you to feel confident that this isn't something you have to go at alone. I think we have first movers like Fox, like I see, like others in the room, who have taken this and shaped it to be their own. I am also very hopeful in the next few years, you will see this underpinning a lot of what's happening in the market anyway, and you'll be able to recognize it and say, I see why that's being asked or how that's changing. And the last thing I want to share with you is an opportunity to get involved. Can you hear me? Oh, great. Okay. I'm really glad I checked now rather than. So the last thing I want to share is how to get involved moving forward. As I said, even though I'm in your city, I can't even be with you. This is shocking, but we all are trying to travel less, and we want to still engage in deep conversation about this. This is still taking shape as we speak. And so we started something with Harvard Business Review called an Idea Lab, where anyone can come on and debate and watch and share on concepts that are still being explored through the Impact Management Project. For those who were a part of the project in the earlier days, you know we used to have online huddles, like little sessions virtually. This is our new version of having an online space where everyone can listen, everyone can contribute, and then take bits back and use it within your context and share what's going well and what's not. So we've just started with a topic on investor contribution, which we've talked a lot about today. And I really hope to see Brazil represented in this idea. To be included in that program. I've lost visual on you. Okay, I'm back. So I'm ending now to say, I think we have a shared vision. Thank you to Vox and all the team and everyone who showed up in this room for your willingness to ask tough questions about impact and also help us all move forward towards a world where we're thinking about what matters to people and planet. We're thinking about what that means for financial performance, whatever context we work in. And we're doing this more and more transparently as we go and as much as we can. So thank you very much for having me.
Muito obrigada, Amanda. Foi ótimo escutar você. Amanda, a gente tem uma pergunta aqui. E continua ainda aqui.
Jessica, let me know if I should get my translator. The questions. Oh, there she is.
Ok. Tá.
This is my translator.
Ela vai colocar um telefone agora, porque as tradutoras estão ligando no telefone dela para falar qual que é a pergunta, para a gente fazer isso aqui funcionar. Tá bom. Vamos lá. Amanda, na primeira fase do projeto, vocês se reuniram, né, mais de 2.000 organizações para conseguir chegar nos consensos. Agora, a gente está numa fase do projeto que é os atores implementando, de fato, a abordagem. O que você tem percebido como os desafios mais comuns nessa implementação?
Challenges are immense, but then it's more fun when we work on them together. So I think one of the things that people often wonder is where to find the information suggesting they want to know across the 5 dimensions. And I'm sure, Jessica, you faced this looking at the portfolio of Vox. There are going to be a lot of gaps. There's a lot of things we don't know because we've never asked these questions before. So what's happening is people maybe, and often they're sort of like, oh my gosh, I can't, this is too much. But actually, when you allow yourself to leave some blanks and just recognize, okay, if we have some priorities for the next year, and what do we want to know more of as we go, it gets a lot easier and sort of just a way of thinking. So I think that's been key. I think the other thing that I can't repeat enough is that this doesn't replace anything you already do. So think of it more of a checklist or a way to make sure that your approach is thorough. Because other people who are bringing it back sort of go to their team and say, forget all of this, throw it in the trash, we're starting with this, and that is not the point. The point is to say, is what you're doing capturing everything you want to know? And then context is super important as well. A multinational corporation versus a small local charity will have a lot of different variation in the effects that they have to prioritize and manage. And a local charity, or I've even worked with social workers who are like, a norm of the impact management project is that where possible, you ask people what's important to them, right? We talked about that earlier, and I know it's an approach that's being taken in many contexts in Brazil. But there's also contexts where you can't ask. It's sensitive, it's difficult. So I think the context in which we're trying to find information is becoming clearer, and hopefully by sharing the lessons with other people in our space, we're learning the better ways to do that. So just to say, everyone who's applying it, including me and the team, are learning something new every day. The only way we're advancing is if we share that and talk about it and think through possible solutions. Because I don't know how the financial system was created, but I don't think it was in a few years with virtual huddles on Zoom. So we're now trying to think, what does impact management look like? And we're going to have to work through all those details together.
A plataforma do Impact Management Project, ela traz frameworks para analisar cada uma das dimensões? Como tem sido o papel de vocês em reunir os diferentes frameworks que existem no campo?
Yeah. Okay, I'm here now. So yes, on the website, I'm going to actually, because I'm on a computer instead of in a room with you, I am going to share my screen and show you where to find that. So this is the Impact Management Project website, which is yours. It's a public good. It's only as useful as much as you use it. So use it. And here in latest updates, it's also in resources. You'll see examples of where the IMP is being applied or used in frameworks that investors or companies are using. But also I'm sure you know of B Lab and the B Corporation, I hope. And if you do, we do signpostings, right? So where do the 5 dimensions show up in the B Impact assessment? So if you're already using that, what questions is it answering already? And where might you want to ask some more questions that's not captured there? So just to say, on the latest updates part of the website, that's where you'll find the link between what's out there and what's and the IMP consensus.
Também tem, a gente comentou do Lean Data um pouco mais cedo. Aqui também tem uma contribuição do Lean Data com exemplos de como que eles estão integrando a metodologia do Lean Data com o Impact Management Project. E aí dá para a gente ver várias outras nesse sentido também. Agora, a última pergunta, Amanda, quais são os próximos passos do Impact Management Project agora? Chegamos a um consenso, vocês estão apresentando alguns frameworks. O que está no roadmap de vocês para a atuação do Impact Management Project? O que a gente pode esperar?
Okay. So, what can you expect? First of all, a call to action to be a part of the conversation. We want to see this awareness growing and visibility to where all of this is showing up in our processes and practices. So a big part of my role is making sure that people know about what's happening and what resources are out there, and are able to use them or feedback on what more is needed. But it's on all of us to sort of take this and shape it. So I hope to see a lot more of that in the next few years. The focus of the project and the team right now is on these large standard-setting organizations, because there we see a real opportunity for a tipping point. For example, the United Nations Development Program coined the Sustainable Development Goals. So the UN created them, but don't give any guidance about what it means to put an SDG on your impact report. Right now, it's sort of, yep, I work on health, pop on the pretty color. So what they're doing is, one, building out assurance in a way. What do they want to see around transparency when someone says they're contributing to the SDGs? And what data do local country offices of the UN have that means that a company or an investor doesn't have to go find it themselves? So in two really big ways, what we'll see is a push towards more transparency and clearer narrative around it that makes it not so painful to find what we're looking for. So that's one example on the right-hand side here of how the UN is coming into this. We also have a lot of, over the next year, I think we're going to see a lot more guidance for those of you who sort of say, I want a handbook of what is the best practice that I could be doing. That's going to be coming out on behalf of all of these standard setters. And then in a few years, I think you'll actually see a place where you can go and see through, based on your goals, to what indicators make most sense for you. So instead of measuring everything and hoping it's relevant, actually taking an approach to say, this is the context I'm in, this is the impact I expect, what information do I need to make sure I'm on track, where you don't have to go to IRIS and GIN and GRI and PRI to figure that out on your own. So in a lot of ways, by changing the infrastructure, we're going to make this sort of more normal and user-friendly for those of you in the room who have been trying but struggling with some of the operational bits of applying it.
Muito bom. Mais uma vez, super obrigada pela sua participação. A gente deseja aqui no Brasil que você chegue bem em casa agora de volta. E, com certeza, a gente espera ter você da próxima vez presencialmente com a gente. Super obrigada.
Sao Paulo Airport is beautiful.